Hey everybody, this is Miss Moriarty. I'm here to discuss with us our last topic of Unit 8, and that is 8.15. I know we talked about this slide in class, but I just wanted to review it one more time. So remember, it's important to understand that we know pollutants obviously are going to harm human health, but there are also biological pathogens and infectious diseases that will also inhibit human health as well. We know that pathogens, especially now, tend to adapt to develop new opportunities in order to infect humans and spread through our populations. And specific pathogens can occur in environments regardless of the appearance of their sanitary conditions. Now, another piece of information we need to understand when talking about the spread of diseases is as equatorial type climate zones spread north and south into what are currently subtropical and temperate climate zones, those pathogens and infectious diseases are usually associated with a vector of some sorts. So, some sort of most likely smaller type organisms, such as mosquitoes, that are going to help to spread that disease into that area, which has not necessarily had that disease there before. We know that poverty-stricken, very low-income areas that often lack that sanitary waste disposal will have contaminated drinking water supplies, usually are going to be havens or opportunities for that infectious disease to spread quite rapidly. Children, however, with good nutrition are usually better able to fight those infectious diseases and survive in the long run. Now, some diseases we need to be familiar with in this class is the plague. The plague was a disease that was carried by things such as fleas that are infected within the plague bacteria. It's transferred to humans via the bite of an infected organism through that contact and contaminated fluids or tissues. It can also be referred to as the bubonic plague or even Black Death. Individuals who were infected by this experienced swollen glands, black spots, and extreme pain. However, modern antibiotics are highly effective at killing this bacterium and preventing human health. Another disease is tuberculosis. This is a bacterial infection that will typically attack the lungs. It's spread by breathing in the bacteria from the bodily fluids of an infected person. Some symptoms might be feeling weak, sweating, coughing up blood. It's actually estimated that about 1/3 of the world's population is still infected with tuberculosis. And a year-long course of medication can actually treat the infection, but in developing countries, those medicines may not be readily available. So patients do not necessarily take the full prescription. And so that's why tuberculosis is still spread most often in those less developed countries. We see malaria is actually a parasitic disease caused by bites from an infected mosquito. We see it most often in areas found in sub-Saharan Africa. Those infections cause recurrent flu-like symptoms. The traditional approach to combating was widespread spraying of insecticides, and eradication efforts have been proven to, however, be ineffective at eliminating this disease. Now, interestingly enough, if you are someone who actually has the genetic disorder known as sickle cell anemia, you will actually be better off against malaria rather than someone who may not have sickle cell anemia. Because as you can see, it's going to infect your red blood cells. Another disease is the West Nile virus. This was transmitted to humans via a bite from, once again, a mosquito. And you'll see that mosquitoes are quite often vectors in the transmission of disease around the world. This was a highly lethal virus to some species of birds, but most survived the infection. It was first reported in the US back in 1999 in New York. The efforts to combat the mosquito populations and protect against mosquito bites are causing a decline in the US in terms of this disease. Here is SARS and MERS, and you'll notice in the picture here, this kind of looks very similar to what we're dealing with now in terms of COVID-19, because both our SARS and MERS are somewhat similar to coronavirus. So SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. This was a form of pneumonia. It's transferred by inhaling or touching infected fluids. It was first founded in 2003 in Southeast Asia and was caused by a coronavirus. MERS was Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. This was a viral respiratory illness that transferred from animal to human, and it first appeared in 2012 on the Arabian Peninsula. Another disease that we need to be familiar with that is kind of more prevalent now is known as Zika. This was caused by bites from infected mosquitoes. It could be transmitted through sexual contact. It caused babies to be born with unusually small heads as well as damaged brains. Most infected people only experienced mild effects for a few days or weeks, but it could be passed from pregnant mom to then fetus, which was what made this virus so dangerous. And it was prevalent in areas such as Central America, South America, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia, so very, very hot, humid climates. We also need to be familiar with cholera, which is a bacterial disease that comes from infected water. Cholera remains a global threat to public health, and it is an indicator of inequity and lack of social development in that area, because we know that people who are most often going to be suffering from cholera most likely have poor sanitary conditions in that country. People who develop symptoms majority of the time have mild or moderate symptoms, while some may have an acute water diarrhea with severe dehydration, which can lead to death if it is untreated. All right, guys, so here is an FRQ. Actually, we'll be working with this. We worked with this FRQ today. I know that you looked at student responses for this FRQ, but see if you can come up with your own. So take a second and pause the video. All right, at this point, you should have paused the video and see if you could have come up with your own response. And here is the actual accepted College Board rubric that was used in order to grade this FRQ. So take a moment, see if you can provide yourself a score based upon this FRQ. Remember, you had to identify for one new and one old disease. You had to explain how that disease was transmitted through human population and describe an effective method for controlling the spread of the disease. So here, if you identified SARS, here were ways you could control it that were accepted: West Nile virus, cholera, and tuberculosis. All right, guys, if you gave yourself a grade for your practice FRQ here, at this point, you can mark this video as done. Make sure that you have all of your notes for Unit 8, and don't forget, we're going to have our test on Unit 8 this Thursday and Friday.